I've always been this weird person, but I never kind of embraced it. And so comedy just allowed all of that part of me that I was suppressing by being a real actor, kind of came out, and it also helped me become a better actor. Improv allows you to listen and really care for the people you're on stage with, and these were the people that changed my life, and I think that's really when like comedy and all of that, it all kind of came together, and it was all this realization of like what I was supposed to be doing with my life.
Filmmaker Magazine presents Back to One with Peter Rinaldi.
Shannon DeVido is an actor. She sat down with me in cyberspace to talk about the work. When did you first realize you wanted to perform? And in what capacity was that? Because I know that you're a singer, a comedian. What was that bug that bit you first? And talk about that bite.
So I, for people who are listening and don't know who I am, which is everyone, I am a wheelchair user. I was born with spinal muscular atrophy, so I've been disabled my whole life. And when I was a kid, I really wanted to be an athlete. I love sports, and my brother is an athlete, and so I really wanted to do that. Yes. I thought I was going to be the pitcher for the Chicago Cubs, is what I always say. And at the time they were very bad, so they probably could have used me. But it turns out I was very bad at sports for very obvious reasons. And so in elementary school, we had to be in plays. That was just kind of part of our learning experience. But I really just was drawn to it, and I felt like it fit the right part of me that couldn't play sports but still wanted to do something. And I think like over the years, that just kind of grew inside of me. And I don't think it was never a moment where I was like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to be doing with my whole life. It just became such second nature to who I was as a person performing. And so I started in theater, and then I thought I was going to be a singer for a while. I went to school for music business because my parents said you can't go to school for music. Yeah. And I was like, I'm going to get a less useful degree. And so I got a music business
I'll
degree.
Show you.
Yeah, what? You want to go into music business while the music business is collapsing? I got you. Yep, that was me. Thanks, Napster. And so I'm very old. So then I was like, oh no, but I spent most of my time at school at the theater, and I did a lot of plays there. And then, so then when I graduated, I was just like, no, this is like performing is what I was supposed to do. I just never really realized it until kind of I was forced through all these other things that, not forced through, but I was sent through these other worlds of my life. Then I was like, oh no, I like performing. And then I found comedy much later, which then was a whole different realization of where I was supposed to be in my life and who I was supposed to be around and all of those things.
And the combination of the comedy and performing, when did that start to happen? Like, or was that separated throughout most of this? Like thinking like my impetus to perform separate from the comedy thing. Like when did those come together and you've become a comedic actor?
I think that I always enjoyed the humor of performing. I was always drawn to those kind of characters. Like in college, I played Yenta in Fiddler on the Roof. And I was like, oh, I get to come on stage, make people laugh for 5 seconds and then leave? Yes, I'm on board, 100%. But I don't think that I realized what that was until I think it was like around 2010. I auditioned for an improv group called King Friday, and I got in, and I was like, oh, these are the people I want to be around. This is what I want to be doing. I didn't really know what it was, but like improv and sketch and stand-up all kind of happened at the same time. And then I met these people who just pushed me to be better and be like, and just are so kind and welcoming and let you be weird. You know, I've always been this weird person, but I never kind of embraced it. And so comedy just allowed all of that part of me that I was suppressing by being a real actor, kind of came out, and it also helped me become a better actor. You know, improv allows you to listen and really care for the people you're on stage with, and I just these were the people that changed my life, and I think that's really when like comedy and all of that it all kind of came together, and it was all this realization of like what I was supposed to be doing with my life.
I had an actor last week. We were talking about how he, kind of busted into a role in an audition. It called for like somebody with a thick neck, and we were laughing because his neck is quite the opposite of thick, and he wasn't going to. It is a weird kind of description, but he almost didn't like go for it because of that, but he did, and he played it all differently because he knew he didn't have like the thick neck. So he just played it entirely differently from whatever he thought a thick-necked bro would do. And and he got the role, and we were talking about that. Wow, okay. So like the courage to do it even though it's not laid on the page like that. And I guess we want to get to the place where a disabled actor can look at a listing and say, well, it doesn't say disabled, but I'm going to go for it because I can do this, and I can, and we're almost there, or we're getting there. We'll talk about if we're almost there later, but tell me about what you were doing at this time to get roles, because like something like Difficult People wasn't written for a disabled person, and there you are, busting out in that role to the point where you became a recurring character on that show. But use that as a you could talk about that, but just I want to know in general around that time what you were doing in terms of trying to get roles and how that works for a disabled actor.
It's hard. I mean, I think especially at the time of when I first started, that was never an option. I only got to play disabled characters. And even then, the disabled characters that were out there weren't the greatest roles. I mean, I played a victim on SVU, that was it. And so it's kind of, we have come a long way. But Difficult People was such an honor to be part of, because Julie and the producers of that show really kind of had this forward thinking where they were like, no, this is just the right person for the role. It doesn't matter whether she's disabled or not. And that was revolutionary to me because that never had happened before. Like in my mind, I've always had the idea that I could play anything. It's never really come across my brain that I can only play disabled characters. And so when you're faced with an industry who's forcing you into this box and saying, no, this is the only place that we can fit you, it's hard. And so it takes people like Julie and some of the other people that I've had the opportunity to work with to say, no, it doesn't matter. Like that she can be a weird beat poet. Who cares if she's disabled or not? It does not matter. She's funny. So, I think it's all the disabled actors I know have that mentality already. It's going to take people higher up than us to say, yes, let's do it.
Was this becoming like a frustration, or was it, or were you taking like little victories as fuel, for this whole thing? The industry not changing. Like, was this like, oh my God, how is this? If this is not going to change, why keep going and trying to break this barrier down if it's not moving?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's still a frustration. I think that it is a constant battle that I face every day. And, I have some great teams around me who are working as hard as I am to break that wall down, but it's hard and it is exceptionally frustrating. And I think what that led to, for me anyway, was to start creating my own stuff, Because if I'm going to sit around and wait for the industry to change, it's not going to happen. And so I have to say, all right, well, if you won't put me in this, I'll put myself in it. And then you can see I can do it.
Right.
And so that's kind of where like my YouTube series kind of came from. And, I've like written pilots and stuff. And so it's really like creating my own content was what was fueled out of that frustration that you're talking about, because it's constantly there and it's constantly in the forefront of my brain.
How did this amazing role in Best Summer Ever come to you?
It's like the least interesting story. The casting director reached out to me because they needed somebody to do it, and I think that she like came to me and I submitted an audition tape. And again, the dancing part, I apologized in my audition. Don't do this in real life. I was like, I'm really sorry.
Was that part of the audition tape? You had to dance?
Yeah,
okay,
I did, and I did it, and afterwards I was like, I'm very sorry. I will not be talking to you. And so, yeah. But I knew Tara, who cast it, from a musical that we did together off Broadway. And so she remembered me, I guess, from that, and reached out.
See, this is okay. This is why actors should always do off Broadway, because there's going to be somebody that's going to remember you from back then, even though there was 3 people in the audience total over the course of 5 days.
No,
it led to this.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was a really fun show too.
What was that?
It was called The New Hopeville Comics, and it was an off-Broadway show that was written by Nate Wida, and it was so fun and so ridiculous. And the woman that played the lead was in Waitress. Christine Dwyer.
Oh, yes.
Was the lead of that show. And so I've gotten to watch her career like fly.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Literally, because she was in Wicked. Yeah. So you just never know who you're going to meet when you do stuff.
Right. And so, all right. So then you sent that audition tape. You apologized. They looked at the apology. They're like, "Thank God she apologized," because even though I have no, I mean, we'll get to this. I have no idea what you're talking about not knowing how to dance. I mean, but you're talking to a guy who doesn't know how to dance. So I cannot be the judge of this. But I didn't watch the movie and think, "Wow, she." And I'll go even further in a second about your movement. I mean, well, let's talk about this now. Because you let's just jump to this. You actually have this way of moving in the chair that I noticed in this movie, particularly in this one scene, and I had to rewind it. Rewind? Is it called rewinding anymore?
I think it's still rewind.
Okay.
Because the button still says rewind.
Yeah, it says rewind. So when you say goodbye to Tony, the character Tony, and the way you moved in the chair, it felt so evocative of a moment of this like romantic goodbye moment of turning and like having to leave and backing up, that I was like, and then I was noticing other things you were doing in the chair that was like fluid and like flowing. And so I'm sorry. I mean, like, so I think that this is a block you have about dancing. You can dance. Let this be a inspiration to you.
That's very, very kind of you to say. And also very kind of you to notice. I think that it's, I always say that I'm a physical comedian, even though I don't do pratfalls. I think my chair is absolutely second nature to who I am. Yes. I've been in it since I was like 7. I know it better than I know like my legs. I mean, it is my legs. Like, so I think being able to button a moment with my chair.
That's the way to say it.
Is important. I think that's just about knowing your body again. It's just a
Yes.
way of, so while I'm not a good dancer, I do think physically I have a way of being able to manipulate my chair so that it is part of, it's one fluid
I
motion. It
got
is
you.
one thing. And I do, but that, and again, that goes back to the authenticity of being a disabled person living in the
Exactly.
world.
Exactly.
That's just part of me. I never
Right.
think about it.
Right. And and so that makes sense. So that this the fluidity you're talking about and being able to button a moment in the chair is different than rhythm, right?
Yes, I think so. I mean, also
So,
like I look like a weird bird, like trying to flay. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't never know what to do with my hands. Like it's like I don't know. And then you look at somebody like Ali Stroker, who is like on stage and dancing,
okay.
and you're like,
Okay.
oh, that's what it's supposed to look
I
like.
gotcha.
Okay. And so I'm just like, no, I'm gonna be over here being weird. Like I'm fine with that, and I'm very okay with it. But like also like I can button a moment like on in
Right.
a comedic setting with my chair,
Yes.
like or
Yes.
if I go slower or it's just
Right.
all of that is part of kind of how I perform.
Right, right, right. So what was this like? So you get the role. Like I was going to say, like you apologized. It didn't work that you thought they would never call you because they did.
Right.
And so did you understand what this was when you were auditioning, or was this just like it sounds okay? It sounds like a role. Sounds pretty good. Did you know that this was the lead role?
I did, I think. I knew it was the lead.
So when they said you got it, this must have been pretty exciting.
It was very exciting, but it was also presented to me in a way that was like, hey, we're doing this thing on a farm. You want to come be part of it? And I was like, oh, sure. And that we're going to pay you? Okay, cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it wasn't, I don't think the gravity of getting a lead role in the same way that like, if Marvel were to call me and say like,
Right,
hey, we got
right,
a lead
right.
role for you. I don't think it's the same in my brain.
Right.
Because it wasn't presented in that
I see.
respect. It was definitely like, hey, come hang out with us and we'll
I
give
see.
you some money. And I was like, okay. And so, yeah, I don't think I knew exactly what was happening going into it.
So
I
that
still don't
probably,
now.
but I was gonna say that probably helped then. If you don't know, if you didn't know kind of the kind of looseness of that kind of thing, then probably helped you,
Probably a
right?
little bit because I didn't put the pressure on myself.
Right.
I'm a perfectionist and I put a lot of pressure. I did this even in school. Like I had to get like straight A's and stuff. And I think that a lot of times, especially when I'm auditioning, I have to be perfect. And I think for this, I thought it was just like hanging out. And so it didn't, like, I still wanted to be perfect because, again, I can't do anything without wanting to be perfect. But like, it didn't feel the same way as like auditioning for something like huge, if that makes any sense. Like,
Yes, yes.
not to
No, I
disparage
gotcha.
this production.
Yeah.
But it didn't feel the same way.
Yeah, yeah. So when you do realize though that you're the lead and this is kind of like the starring part, which you haven't really had, like you were talking about, like supporting roles, you can nail it, you can go in, boom, and people notice you and it's great and it's wonderful and you can button scenes and everything, but now you have to carry this character kind of through this the arc of this character kind of. I mean, and I've had people talk on this show about, going from a supporting thing to suddenly the lead and what that means and how you have to approach that whole, even the performance differently. It's not just about a matter of you're in a lot of scenes. It's about like this arc of this character and like, how do you navigate that? Was that any of that on your mind when you started doing this?
Oh yeah, and it was really hard. I think that I was so used to just being like, okay, here's my one scene, and I'm gonna do it okay, and then I'll think about it for 2 weeks about how I could have done it better. And
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, I learned so much doing this. I think I'm so grateful to have had that opportunity to do it on a stage that was not the pressure filled thing where I got to learn and I got to figure out what it feels like to go not in order. Going from theater to a film is you do it from beginning to end, and you know what your arc is, and you know where your emotions live and in each beat. And so that was a learning experience. And I think I'm so grateful to know what that feels like and know that I can do it, but no, so that when I do eventually get to do something on a grander scale, where there's all this pressure and there's like a network or a studio behind you with like tons of money going, don't screw it up. I know that I have that to fall back on, and like, no, you've done this before, like you can do it, just go out there and do it. So yeah, but it was, I mean, it was absolutely a learning experience that I'm very happy to have had.
What I really loved about this movie is that I'm seeing people that I don't normally see in movies being, I don't know what the word is, like, it felt like the creatives were celebrating their differences and their uniqueness. And so I can watch this movie over and over again. Like, I loved everybody in it, and I just was like, had a smile on my face the entire time. And I think, part of the great thing of it is it follows a wonderful formula of romantic comedies, and it kind of needed to do that because the audience is able to like appreciate the people more in that structure like that. And so who are these people that made this? How did they have the foresight to be like, we're going to trust that everybody can do this. It's going to combine into an experience where everybody is going to contribute in a way that they can, to the point where that is going to be the value of it. I mean, that's what I found amazing about it. And I'm like, and somehow they trusted themselves to do this, and on top of that, it's a musical. I mean, the idea that they could like add that extra layer of it and they could pull it off. I mean, like independent musicals. I mean, like, so were you ever there and thinking, do these people know what they're doing? Like when was the trust when was the trust fulfilled for you, where you were like, I'm in good hands here?
All right, this is what I will say about Zeno, is that they have created an environment that is filled with passion and love, and they are basically a Ben and Jerry's ice cream pint in like human form. They have infused. Yum. Yes, exactly. It's just something you want to be part of. It's just they just radiate energy and excitement and positivity, and they think that we could have this utopia where everyone lives in harmony and nothing bad could ever happen because we all get these opportunities. And they live by that motto. And so for them to take on something so ambitious is not surprising because they truly believe that they can do anything. And at the integrated cast and crew that they have also, created and nurtured, it can also do anything. And they truly believe that. And I think that it always felt like they thought this could be something very special. And they always thought that everyone involved was someone special. So there was never a moment where I thought that they thought that this could go drastically awry, because they truly believed in it.
That's great.
I, on the other hand, I'm always a skeptic and cynic. I don't know if anyone's reading my Twitter, but if you do, I am a Debbie Downer sometimes. But I mean, I'm always very cynical. And I think it's because, Hollywood has made it that way. You kind of like are always like, this is going to be terrible. But being surrounded by that positive energy and kindness and support made it worth every, negative thought that I had in my brain. And they push it out because they believe in me more than I believe in anything I've ever done. So, yeah, I don't think there was ever a moment that I thought they thought this was going to be a disaster.
I thought I heard every terrible COVID ruined my year story until I learned that this movie was about to go to South by Southwest last year. And I just thought, there is no God. God doesn't exist. I was a believer. Now I believe in Satan.
Oh no!
That is, yes, Satan rules the earth, clearly.
The past 4 years have taught us anything. Yes. That is 100% true.
I mean, so were you thinking that too? I mean, Satan. Because this is this would have been so amazing at that festival. I mean, this would have people would have been in the streets. You must have thought this is it. I mean, how'd you get over that?
Yeah, it sucked. But the whole world sucked. I mean,
right.
We had a year of just the worst things that could ever happen to a society have happened. And I think that complaining about my movie not being able to go to a festival is the least of all of our concerns over the past year, quite honestly. So, and to be completely honest, yes, it sucked, but the thing that most sucked is I didn't get to go see certain things. I was Chris Evans was launching Starting Point at the festival also, and I was yep, I'm gonna go see that. And so that's the kind of stuff I'm the most upset about. I think now our film is being more people have probably been able to see it now because it's streaming and it's
right.
more accessible to people. I don't think I would have been able to do half of the interviews I've gotten to do for
right.
it because I get to do them all virtually. So in the grand scheme of things, what I was dealing with was negligible to what everyone else in the world was dealing with. And so just getting through the past year, I have a whole new appreciation for everything that I get to do.
So there was a barrier between me as an audience member and how I was taking in performances by disabled people, I think. And there was something that happened, and I'll tell you what that was in a second. But I want to blame this barrier on, creatives and their unimagination and the roles they were giving disabled people. But I think that's only part of it. I think there was something that I didn't want to be uncomfortable or something watching someone. It's shameful. There's something about that if I look back on it. But Steve Way changed me,
Okay.
and Rami like that. And the shameful thing is that was just last year. And I want to say that was because that was a nice full role for someone. And that's the reason why. But I want to know from you, what could we do as audience members to help with this whole thing? Can we demand, more inclusion? Can we put up a stink about something which I just found out, the other film that I really loved and probably helped me was a film called Margarita with a Straw. The problem with that movie that I just found out, which I was shocked about, is that she is not a disabled person. She's an able-bodied actor playing a disabled person, and I didn't know. But I thought she was disabled, and that actually was another great full role that probably led the way to me to loving Steve Way, which led the way for me to love this movie that you're in and to love you. But the idea that this woman in that movie is an able-bodied actor, is that a weird double-edged thing there where it's a problem because they could have found someone that would have done just as an impacting of a job as she did if they really tried. Mm-hmm. And they didn't. But do we still value it because it did lead someone like me toward wanting to see disabled people in roles where they're living just like the rest of us and not some kind of cliche thing that, is created?
That's a really interesting way to put that. I've never thought of it that way, in that, watching a person who isn't disabled help you move forward. I mean, I really appreciate you kind of saying it that way. What I will say is that now that those have happened, we need to move forward from it. And it shouldn't happen anymore. Mm-hmm. I think that, yes, it's great to see those roles. I mean, it was great to see a lot of roles that are disabled characters living full lives, but being played by an able-bodied person doesn't make me feel represented. It makes me feel like disability is a costume that people think they can just wear.
Right.
And it's not. It's a lived experience. It's a part of my soul and my psyche. And not every disabled person or character is just going to look like an able-bodied person sitting down or an able-bodied person with a cane. It's not. And in the same way that we need to see different ethnic bodies, we also need to see different disabled bodies represented on screen, because that's just as important. I think I've said this many times, is that when I was a kid, I never saw anyone like me on television. And honestly, I still don't. I mean, there's still a very clear idea of what people think disability can look like to be accessible to an able-bodied audience. And I think that Steve is a great example of that, is that he doesn't really look like an able-bodied person sitting down. He looks like him, and he brings that to the role, and he brings the way that he moves to that role, and it makes it a more full character. And so to know also that there are roles out there that are full characters, and I'm not in the running to play it, or anybody with a disability isn't in the run to play it, is not representative or inclusive as a Hollywood. We need to make it more inclusive, and we're all different. We all bring something different. Disability is such a wide spectrum of people and personalities and movement, and it's vast and diverse and interesting, and the intersectionality is there. And if you just accept it and you embrace it, then we're going to be a more accepting society. I think a lot of times too, the roles that I've seen as I've grown up are all about how being disabled is terrible. Yes. How it's this awful thing that we all need to be afraid of and feel bad for and coddle. Right. And that's not it at all. And I don't really think I learned that until I was in my late 20s, because I never saw it. I never saw anything besides feeling bad for myself or hating my body or hating who I was. I never saw it. So if we start having these roles where they are living full lives and they're living, they're being humans, then kids who were like me watching it won't feel that way growing up. Mm-hmm. And that's really at the end of it what needs to change, is that people don't need to feel that they are a burden or a something to be ashamed of. They need to feel included and accepted and worthy of being a human. And that's what roles like Sage and Steve's character and Rami, that's what those characters are doing for people moving forward.
Shannon DeVido, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. This was so fun.
Back to One is a production of Filmmaker Magazine, which is a publication of The Gotham, formerly IFP. Listen to back episodes of this podcast at filmmakermagazine.com or wherever you get your podcasts.